advice. I mean, he really doesn't even listen to advice from Charlie. He has this saying, when I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and at that point, everybody's had their say. And and that's the truth. I mean, he really, I mean, you should try giving him advice. I have, believe me. I mean, you see it. You literally see his eyes kind of go off into some weird direction. I mean, he does not listen. So Charlie is somebody that he actually listens to, and in the early days, of course, that changed Warren's investing style because Charlie kept getting him to focus on good companies, quality companies, good companies, quality companies. These days, you know, they're social friends. You know, Charlie doesn't have any role at all in running Berkshire, and he kind of makes jokes about that, but they're social friends.
Step to the mic.
What messages and teachings that Mr. Buffett gives to younger folks like me and just college students in general? Thank you.
Well, I think that the most important thing that he tells students that I've heard him say that I hope people really listen to is to follow your passion, to do what you really want to do, and not waste time with resume-filling jobs, and not work for anybody who makes your stomach churn, because you can't really get ahead that way. I mean, it may seem like it for a while, but in the end, the odds are better if you really love what you're doing, that you'll really, really succeed. So.
All you have to do is walk to the mic. John McFarland's good for a question. Thank you.
Question, I mean, this is something that really surprised me, and you touched on it, Alice. You know, having watched how painful the Solomon experience for Warren was, were you surprised that he invested in Goldman, and why do you think he did it?
I was a little surprised because he's taking some of the same risks. You know, I think he's had a longer time to get to know Goldman's management over decades, and I think he's more comfortable that he understands the inner workings of that bank, but it's still an investment bank. I think that Warren has been impulsive once or twice in his career, and Solomon was a case where he fell in love with John Gutfreund. Warren loves Goldman's management. He's getting another rich premium to do it, just like with Solomon. I do think the one factor that's different is that Goldman is going to be transformed into a deleveraged commercial bank, and it's going to be operated with different regulation. And that is enough of a factor that I could say, okay, I can understand this. But yeah, it is kind of similar. Yes. Yeah, and that's the other problem is that, you know, he really doesn't, Warren doesn't love paying people to begin with. I mean, that's, you know, something that he does, I won't say reluctantly, but you hear him say, so-and-so, it would take 3 people to replace them, and then that's true, and then they wonder, why am I not getting paid 3 times as much? I mean, the people who work for Berkshire Hathaway are not paid, you know, like Wall Streeters, or even like they might make somewhere else. So when he started being on the board of Solomon, he was just stunned at the way people on Wall Street are paid, and really almost with a moral kind of repugnance at it. And there was some justification to that because it's a heads they win, tails they don't lose situation. So Goldman, yeah, I mean, you know, he's not on the board, and you know, somehow he's reconciled himself to this. Yeah.
Alice, we talked about this a little the other day, but given the deep dive you did with Buffett and Berkshire, and given your background in the insurance industry, I don't know the industry that well, but it certainly appears the company's trading at a meaningful discount to the group. Just what are your thoughts? I mean, just it seems like there's a tremendous disconnect, particularly the way you describe the company. They don't take cat risk. There's a disconnect for me. What am I missing?
Well, I always found as an analyst that the way Berkshire traded and the actual value of the company didn't have much connection to each other. There just wasn't a connection. And particularly, it was rare that you ever saw, and I think this is true of stocks in general, companies that don't, there's not a penalty for taking excessive risk, which also means there's not a reward for taking less risk. And the only way you see it is over a long period of time where a company like Berkshire is able to build its book value, and that Warren and Charlie have the saying, don't go back to go. Well, so you see these other companies that are losing billions of dollars because they've taken the risk. Their stocks are getting killed. What, Berkshire isn't. So to some extent, they're not going backwards. But in terms of the value, it's trading at, what you could argue is a discount to its fair value. It's not the cheapest it's ever been, but it's certainly not getting the kind of premium that you might think. That may be because of Warren's age.
Please.
I was interested in hearing more about your relationship as a research analyst and some of the content of your research reports, specifically like your philosophy for valuation of Berkshire, that kind of thing.
Well, it's been 5 years since I've done any research on Berkshire, but I had a model that I used where I basically valued the float of the company and looked at its future growth, and then in effect added that to the book value, or put a PE on the rest of the earnings. And it was a very, I suggested that people use their own growth assumptions because, it could be anything. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's published on the internet if anybody would like to have a copy of it. Yes.
Alice, I'm really interested in your view of the managers of Berkshire and the ability of Berkshire to retain them after Warren Buffett.
Yeah, a lot of them are actually quite old, and they won't be retainable anyway, because it's time for them to be retired. And there's some that I think are hanging around because they like working for Warren. So that's going to be a very significant challenge that the next CEO will face. Now they've got successors that they've identified for Warren. I think another challenge the next CEO will face is, are those the right people? Because he's let the managers name their own successors. It's going to be a challenge. It really, a lot of it depends on who they pick. They could make a great or a terrible decision of choosing the next CEO. The board could.
Hi, I'm Joseph Matthew. I'm a first year at Darden. Not at the risk of getting too granular, I'm kind of interested in the scratch notes that you were talking about, and the one case you were talking about. If someone who is very quantitatively oriented and knows Excel looked at that and put it into a model, do you think that people could understand what's going on inside Warren's head when he's trying to value a company and then try and actually replicate that?
Yes. I mean, what you would see is a column that said sales, and a column that said expenses, and a column that said profits, and it would have Kentucky plant, Louisville plant, Kansas City plant, this plant, that plant, and it would have first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, 1958, da 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 da, and then it would end with the last quarter that was reported. That's what it is. That's all it is. And that the difference from a model is it would not add the quarters up, and it would not project anything into the future, nothing. So that's, in other words, he looked at what had been reported, and he said they've earned they've had $1 million in sales, they've earned, this many thousand, I want this much, they've earned this, I want this, can they do it? Yes, no. That's the decision. And the margin of safety, I mean, there's a saying, let me call it to mind, I think it's from The Intelligent Investor, that the margin of safety, the purpose of the margin of safety is to render forecasts unnecessary. Yeah.
Let's do one more question.
On a little bit of a different note, a number of political pundits are throwing out Mr. Buffett's name as a potential candidate for the next Secretary of Treasury under President-elect Obama. From your experiences with Mr. Buffett, do you really think that this would be something he would be willing to leave Berkshire for? That is, to take a role in Mr. Obama's cabinet?
He would have to be shot with a blow dart and dragged in chains to Washington to do this. I mean, I think they've already sort of semi-announced who the candidates are, and the reason he's not one of them is because he would never be taken away from Berkshire. He would never spend his day in meetings. He would never let somebody else schedule his time. But, you know, there's going to be kind of a kitchen cabinet of informal advisors, and he did that for Schwarzenegger. He'll do it for Obama.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? All right.
Alice, I want to thank you so much. I mentioned earlier a couple things. One was that we have gifts for all our presenters, but they weren't going to receive those in real time. We're making an exception in your case. So we do have a small gift for you. I also said early when we started the conference that Mr. Jefferson, as we referred to him, would be very proud of what we're doing here as part of his academical village, his university. He also said in a relationship he had with another of our forefathers some 200 years ago, I don't think the parallel between Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would work, but he had a very interesting relationship with John Adams. And he once told John that I cannot live without books. And I think that's appropriate. This gift has that quote replicated. And we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.